Good afternoon, I'm Howard Lerner, ELPC's Executive Director. What I'm going to talk about today is NEPA, the National Environmental Policies Act. That's our nation's foundational environmental law. The U.S. Supreme Court today heard oral arguments in the 7 counties infrastructure case. This is a case involving the Surface Transportation Board's approval of an 88-mile railway that will be used to ship crude oil from Utah, all the way across down to the Gulf Coast. And the question in the case really involves what's the extent of the environmental impact statement done when you have a big infrastructure project like this. And as often is the case, when something gets to the Supreme Court, it gets pretty rarefied, but the effects of the court's decision are magnified. It's not just about how the court decides this case, but its impact on many, many other cases. Here, the environmental impact statement, according to the DC Court of Appeals, had to look at some effects, like what's the effect of this new rail line on wildlife? How does it affect communities in Colorado and down on the Gulf Coast, where the oil is being brought to a refinery? What's the impact on the overall environment? What are the reasonably foreseeable impacts on the environment? And that's where the court divided. There are courts that have looked pretty broadly at what's a reasonably foreseeable impact, both upstream, from where the project is, and then downstream in terms of the effects of the project. The justices were struggling here. First of all, Justice Gorsuch recused himself from the case because of the involvement with a prominent oil developer in his home state, or back home in the Rockies. So it's 8 justices, and I gotta say that when you hear the oral argument, they were struggling of where to come out. I think we're likely to see some cutting back of the scope of environmental impact statements under NEPA, but it doesn't look like there are 5 justices who want to pull it back as far as the railway company and its proponents were urging. So stay tuned. How the court decides what reasonably foreseeable impacts of, in this case, an 88-mile railroad carrying crude oil, what has to be considered in the environmental impact statement? That's a big deal for NEPA, that's a big deal for infrastructure projects, and that's a big deal when it comes to protecting our vital natural resources, wildlife, and people and communities who are along the path. We expect the Supreme Court to issue its decision sometime in the next 6 to 7 months. They'll do it by June 30th. This one's going to be a close call, more to follow.